I've got the car somewhat stored for the winter, so excuse the top, but I wanted to follow up with a final video on the shift mechanism because I have made a couple of changes since the last video. So in the video I did about the shift mechanism at the transmission, I mentioned that I was going to use the second from the furthest out points on the shift mechanism to have a little bit shorter shift than stock, but fairly close to stock. I was getting some friction in the cable mechanism when I was doing that, so I could kind of feel a little friction while I was shifting. And I looked at the angle that the cable was making from the housing to the shift mechanism, and you can't really see it here, but the angle was pretty extreme. I shouldn't say pretty extreme. It was a reasonable angle as the cable came out of the housing, and that was actually the thing that was causing friction, because if I put some lubrication on the cable, the friction would go away. So what I ended up doing was replacing the aluminum housing bracket that comes with the Letzla with the stock one. And you can see here that the stock mechanism kind of angles the cables relative to each other. So see that angle versus that angle. And the Letzla actually is, they're parallel. And that was just not a good angle for the shift mechanism where it was. I'm going to try and point here so you can kind of see how the cable makes a straight shot. So here's the housing for the shift gate. Back here, let's see if I can point to it here. There, you can see the knuckle for the shifter. So here you can hopefully see that it's a straight shot, or fairly straight shot, from the exit of the housing to the end of the shifter. And that is where it wasn't straight for the Letzla. So the Letzla came out parallel to the crossgate and then made a pretty, it was not extreme, but a noticeable bend. The cable had to make a noticeable bend as it came out of the housing to get over to the left to get to that shifter. It's really no bend if you use the third from the furthest out, but if you use the second, it's a bend, and it was enough to cause noticeable friction in the shifter. So that's why the stock bracket has been helpful. So I tried two things. The first thing I did is I used the Letzla bracket, but I moved the throw, the shift, a tie down point to the second one from the third one from the inside, which shortened the shifts, but I just didn't like it. It was too much force and it just didn't feel natural. So I put it back to the second one from the outside, and then I switched to the stock bracket, and that has completely eliminated any friction. So that absolutely worked. So if you're doing a Letzla but not shortening the shifts too much, you might want to consider using the stock housing attachment bracket. The other thing that I did, so a couple other things that I did. In the video on the Shift R111, I had the shifter set completely vertical when I did the adjustment to the cable lengths. I've since gone in and made some adjustments to the neutral position of the Shift R, so that it's kind of hard to tell, but the lever is canted a little bit over to the right now, so it's a little further away from my leg and a little bit more like stock. if you remember in the video, the stock mechanism actually, the stock column or shaft has a pretty extreme bend to it. This one's straight, but you can make some adjustments to the neutral position. So there's the wound spring that adjusts where the neutral position is, has a screw head on it. If you loosen that screw and move the shifter over and then tighten the screw, you can somewhat adjust this neutral position, and that's what I did a little to the left. It helps in a couple of ways. So first of all, it moves the shifter further away from your leg, so when you're in first, you're far less likely to be touching the mechanism or the shifter. It helps in going into reverse, so you don't necessarily run into the console when you go into reverse. Mine still does. You can still kind of hear it, but actually I can get it so that it doesn't now. So there's if I push too far. Well, there's no problem over on this, on the 5th, 6th gate. There's no interference. So this is the more natural position, and actually this is somewhat what Kinetic suggests is the neutral position. The concern I have with the way Kinetic suggests is they do suggest that the neutral position be a little over to the right, but they don't suggest adjusting the spring. So you kind of have the spring fighting, the spring in the shifter fighting the neutral position at the transmission, and I just that's not the way I would adjust it. I like this spring neutral position matching the neutral position in the transmission. So those two just want to find the same location, and then this is not fighting that one, and there's no concern of if there's some residual long-term stress on the neutral position of the transmission at all. Okay, so that's two things. So that's the bracket at the transmission side, the neutral position at the shift R. The third thing I did, and I don't think I may not have needed to do it, but I replaced the cables with the Kinetic cables. So I replaced the SSC cables with the Kinetic cables because I'm trying to get rid of that rattling noise that I had recorded in the previous videos. When I removed the SSC cables, I found that, and I noted this in one of my previous videos, I found that the cable was actually rubbing against the bolt that holds the back end of the emergency brake. So there was a little chafing on that cable. So you have to be really careful and route the shift cables down onto the floor. Make sure they are not going to come in contact with the brake mounting screw. You may need to use cable ties. The other thing is, so I haven't nailed this down yet, but it definitely lowered the amount of rattling. I think what's going on is I think that the under tray on the car is contacting the cable, and it's rattling against the cable and transmitting the noise into the shifter. So that's something that I still need to work on. But I'll say that the Kinetic cables are very high quality. I don't think they're as high quality as the SSC cables. The SSC cables have the heat shielding at the transmission end. The Kinetics don't, and they have a rubber boot at the transmission end between the housing and the end of the cable itself, and the Kinetic cables don't. So I do prefer the SSC cables, but really both of them are real high quality, and they'll probably both last the life of the car. One of the things I wanted to note as well is the guide, the little plastic guide that actually moves the shifter at the transmission. So it's that little plastic thing that sits on the post in the Wetzlar, a little black piece of plastic.
that thing absolutely needs to be greased. So I noted in a previous video that I was getting a squeak when I'd go over to the 5th, 6th gate. And it's because that little plastic piece was not greased. So oddly, when you pull it off to do the Wetzlar install, that plastic piece isn't greased at all from the factory, and there's no problem. But Wetzlar suggests that you grease that thing when you put it back on, and you absolutely do have to grease it to keep the squeaking from happening. So now there's no squeak going into 5th, 6th. So that's a quick update on where I am with the transmission now. Actually, I think it's in really good functioning condition now, but I am gonna try and see if that plate underneath the car is touching the cable, and I'll put some foam in between and see if that totally eliminates the rattle. I wanted to do a quick video on the painted vents. So I had a little incident with a Cerakote plastic coating that turned out really badly on the stock vents. So to get the Cerakote off, I had to sand the vents to get the Cerakote down, and so I decided instead of buying new vents, I would paint them. So had them painted satin black, and the contrast is actually really nice. They, in my opinion anyway, look pretty good. So I did the rear vents, and then the side vents. And they are a satin finish, but not gray anymore. Now they're black.